one of my brothers said, like, what are you crying about? I said, well, these kids, it's so sad. So he said, why don't you do something? And I went, well, I just will. You get to this concrete structure and there's just babies lined up on mats on the floor. There was every single reason and justification to not pursue that. All I knew was I gave my word. So it was a room of like 150 people and I said, I'm going to build an orphanage. We ended up spending maybe around $100,000 and built a home that was worth about $850,000. So the rest was from people donating, contributing their time. And then at one point, my dad took 6 months off work to contribute to make sure that we got the project done. I often talk about Raise the Roof was kind of like my baby, who is now 16 years old.
What are you sacrificing to achieve this, to keep your word?
This is the question that'll make me cry. And I have no issue with crying, so, you know.
Danielle is a purpose-driven leader and executive coach, sharing insights that cut through the noise and guide you to take action.
So in my programs, having people feel safe to be vulnerable is really important. So my first criteria for working with people is like, are you actually willing to do the work? So I often say to people, how long have you been thinking about sending that email? Like, what if you could just send the email? So in our brain, we may have it that we're very busy. Where are we actually spending our time? So that could look like just track your time for like 2 days. What do you actually spend your time doing? And just that process of tracking it and bringing awareness to it could be enough to cause someone to go, wow, I realized I just spend like 3 hours every night on my phone.
What would the 21-year-old Danielle tell you today?
Oh, that's so moving. Probably just thank you.
Danielle, thank you so much for making time to have this conversation. I'm keen to unpack some of the work you do, but also learn from your journey.
Awesome.
You've lost a friend at 21.
Mm-hmm.
What did that loss reveal to you about purpose? Did it give you that moment to reflect, unearth purpose, or did it give you more drive to actually move towards purpose?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. So I had spent a lot of time with that friend of mine, visiting her in the year before she died. She'd been unwell for a really long time. And so I had a lot of time in hospital. In fact, almost every day, I think after school, I would go and visit her in hospital, or after uni or work, whatever I was up to when we were 21. And then when she died, there was this space left in my life. So physically she was gone, but there were also these afternoons where there was this huge missing. So I just spent so much time with her. And I was at home watching TV and an ad flashed, one of those terrible, dramatic, sad ads about children in Africa flashed. And I was brought to tears, probably part of grief and questioning everything at 21. And one of my brothers said, like, what are you crying about? I said, well, these kids, it's so sad. And he said, well, why don't you do something? And part of my identity, so part of how I came to be and survive in the world, was to be someone who's a bit like, I'll show you. So he said, why don't you do something? And I went, well, I just will. So I called up one of my really good friends and said, hey, I think I'm going to go volunteer in an orphanage. Do you want to come? Now, that was literally how that conversation went with this friend of mine. And she said, can I just call you back in like 5 minutes? So called me back and said, yep, let's do this. And so within, I think it was like 3 to 6 months, I was in an orphanage in Tanzania. And, you know, we went up this beautiful green hill in a bus. You get to this concrete structure and there's just babies lined up on mats on the floor. And I think in that moment, my brain had a conniption and I could not understand how I was worried about who was dating who and what I was going to wear out at Mooseheads on Saturday night here in Canberra. And there were these children that were getting, if they're lucky, 2 meals a day and spend a lot of their time on a mat on the floor. And something went, this is not okay on my watch. and you need to do something. But then I parked it for years. I just knew I wanted to do something, but I had no idea anything more than that. But that profoundly shifted my whole view around, one, having a best friend who I just loved and adored die at 21 has you get that life is not this predictable long-term thing. It's like at any moment, someone can be, in the way I articulated it, was someone could be taken from you at any time. So between that and then, going to Tanzania off the bat of that, straight off the back of that, it was, there were some big shifts in my perspective of life and me and what mattered and what I wasn't okay with.
Tell me about the decision-making process, because yes, it sounded spontaneous, but you still have to find out a little bit about the region, figure out how do we get there, figure out can we afford to get there, what is the infrastructure like, because now you have some additional support, yes, with your friend, but some responsibility also. How did those thought processes play in your mind?
Oh boy. I mean, I probably don't research things as much as I should. I go, if I'm inspired to do something, I take action. So interestingly, a woman I was working with was talking about volunteering overseas, and she never got there, but she was sharing about it, and I thought that was really interesting. And so I just reached out to a volunteering organization at that stage and said, I want to do this. What does it cost? And I think my friend and I ended up fundraising. We had the fundraising chocolates and fundraised some funds to help pay for the fee to go and volunteer. And then we just booked and got our shots and went.
Tell me about when you got there. What were some of those emotions that went through your mind? Because you had that purpose. And now you're there and the purpose is in front of you. You can see all these children. What goes through your mind then?
To get into the place we were staying at was right near Mount Kilimanjaro. And to get in, we came on this rickety, tiny plane that didn't fly very high. And my friend was absolutely petrified. And then we arrived. And by the time we arrived, it was kind of not like moving into dusk into nighttime. And we were just in this bus. I mean, the bus had the logo of the organization we were volunteering with. And I just remember looking at her going, I have no idea what is happening right now. I hope these people are really trustworthy and wonderful. But there was this sense reflecting now of like just surrendering. So that was really fascinating. Like, we are here. We are somehow in Tanzania now in a bus, hopefully going to where we need to be going. And then I think it's such an interesting question, because when I am now, we'll talk about this later, but I've been back to Botswana many times. And what's there for me about when I first saw those children was just, probably this isn't fair. And there was a little girl there whose name was Happy, but she was always crying out of one eye. She just had a constant stream of tears. Now, that could have been a health something, and they called her Happy, but she was not actually. And so I guess I don't even have language for what that's all like. It's quite moving. It almost makes me want to be moved to tears, but there's something in my humanity that just was profoundly moved by that.
And I asked that question, and thank you for going down that journey to reflect, because sometimes the passion and the purpose is there, but when you get there, there is fear and I want to go back to comfort. But you didn't. You stuck through it.
Yeah.
Tell me about what are some of the difficult days looking like when you're there, when you're doing work, when you're tired, when you're exhausted, when you miss home, but when you miss some of the comforts of home also? What do those difficult days look like?
Well, I have been doing a lot of personal development work since I was about 25. That's when I started Raise the Roof. And so the time in which hard exists for me is not very long anymore. So in those moments, I will usually call somebody to get what I would say complete or clear. So we'll just say, can I just speak at you for as long as I need to just tell you everything that is going on in my brain, in my body, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And then usually once I just get all that out and have an opportunity to articulate what is the actual upset here, which is something isn't going my way and I want it to. It could be, it's rarely fear for me. Fear isn't really the thing for me. It's more like, I want to do this and something is getting in my way, and it will be frustration. Or when I was in Botswana last year, that marked a really significant part of our project because we'd made the first major contribution to support the project in Botswana, and then I was there. And I was overcome with, I don't really have language for it. It's not proud, it's not sad, it wasn't any of those emotions. It was like being profoundly moved by humanity, mine and what I was seeing around me. And so that takes time to process and needs a space to be able to speak that, feel that, cry, do whatever I need to do. And I'm just overwhelmed by the actual beauty and goodness in humanity. That's what shows up for me mostly. And so that sometimes feels more uncomfortable than me being frustrated because something doesn't go my way is pretty familiar to me now. I know how to move through that. But that being profoundly moved to tears for long periods of time, that was new for me. Yeah.
We spoke about having courage, bravery, not experiencing or not giving fear too much opportunity to step in. Where does that come from?
Well, so fear is there. So usually the night before I go to any of the African countries, I have a mini freak out. What am I doing? How am I getting from A to B? Long flight.
It's a long flight.
Yeah, it can be quite long flights and a lot of uncertainty. And often I travel over there on my own. So it's navigating that on my own. But I think there have been times in my past where fear has showed up and I've taken the action anyway. And I know myself well enough to know that fear is not sufficient to stop me unless it is an instinctive, physical, I need to get out of here type of fear. But if it's I'm a bit nervous, I don't know where I'm going, what if this doesn't go the way I want it to go, I have enough experience of, essentially taking that 7 seconds of courage and life turning out really wonderfully and most moments being pretty extraordinary, that I know where my fear comes from. And it's not, my fear is sort of from my reptilian brain a lot of the time. Fear of failure, fear of not looking good, fear of messing up, fear of, embarrassment or disappointment. And that's not who I am. That's just a part of my brain that tries to keep me very safe. So when I think about my purpose or who I really want to be in the world, like brave and courageous and making a difference, to do that to the extent that I would love to, takes overcoming fear and setbacks all the time and not being stopped. So I channel that, I think.
You spoke about purpose. You spoke about now being on this mission. So you took your friend, you got to Africa, you got to Tanzania, you saw the children there. So now you've experienced it also. How did you uncover it, or how did you work towards, okay, I'm here, I've made it here now, I'm going to do something that is meaningful? What was that thought process like?
The whole conversation about purpose is really interesting. So there's some schools of thought that get you to create your purpose. So what is you're here now, what is the purpose or the future you want to be creating or the difference you want to be making? I've recently been exploring what does it look like to look backwards? So what are the key themes, threads, trends through your jobs, what you've been moved by, your passions? What if somehow purpose is in there? So when I was there, it wasn't like I don't think I consciously thought about much. It was just like a knowing that I need to do something here. It was at that point, it was very like unsophisticated and just very, this is just not okay. I want to do something for these children. And that was about as profound as it was for me then.
From your journey now, because now you have years of experience behind you.
Yeah.
For someone that's around that early 20s age that sees something that really moves them, but somehow something is holding them back, what are some of the steps that you'd recommend they take to explore if this is something they actually want to get into?
Well, I think the first thing to explore is what's getting in the way. And that, again, and I will keep using the term reptilian brain, but it could be your shadow, your identity, your machinery. There's a whole number of different ways to articulate that. Part of it is getting all of that stuff out of the way so that you actually have a space to reflect on your purpose or what matters to you unclouded or from nothing, without all of the yeah, but if you, but what about, and how are we going to make money and how are you going to do it? And then sometimes I think we're all looking for the right answer. Is this the right path? Is this my purpose? Am I 100% sure this is my purpose? And my advice to people is just do something. Take an action, because whatever people believe, it's like life will orient you. So, when I went to Tanzania, it was 5 years later when I had that space to really reflect on what am I doing with my life? I was 25. And what came out of my mouth was, I'm going to build an orphanage. Now, I did not think, I did not necessarily want to say that. I did not know where that was coming from out of my mouth, and that was just what came out of my mouth. And there was every single reason and justification to not pursue that. But all I knew was I gave my word. So it was a room of like 150 people, and I said, I'm going to build an orphanage. And the thing that has been at the source of me fulfilling on my purpose essentially is that I honor my word, even when it's really hard and really scary. So that there's probably a lot of spiritual places to look to determine what that experience was about. But I just spoke those words and then honored my word. So for people who, I think we can get so stuck trying to figure out if this is the right path and what if it isn't this. It's, for me, my purpose, as defined at the moment, is to cause, create, and evoke freedom, self-expression, and actions that alter humanity. So that looks like working with an organization to support orphan and vulnerable children. That looks like working with women in business. That looks like organizational transformational work to have people upgrade their software so that they're not being stopped by, is this right, or am I good enough, or what if I fail, or what shame, rejection, all of what's driving us. So my purpose isn't one, it's not expressed in just one channel. It's who I am, who I aspire to be. I'm not always excellent at doing that, but it's who I aspire to be with everyone all the time. And so it could also be a conversation around what purpose means or is, because for me, it's not something like I'm going to stop youth suicide in Australia. For some people, that is a really clear purpose. Mine is around the difference I want to make inside of how I communicate, how I act, how I be everywhere in all areas of my life.
Thank you for articulating that so well. When I looked through some of the work you have done, this is a theme I saw. It was not just purpose and grand vision. There was momentum in all of it. And that's what you just spoke of, because sometimes people can have purpose and vision and this is my dream that I want to do, and they're limited by it.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what the next step is like.
Yeah.
How important is it to take the next step? How important is it to start gathering momentum without just shouting affirmations in the mirror?
Look, and affirmations have a wonderful place, for sure. And so does creating really beautiful visions and people who have really incredible ideas. But my experience is nothing moves in the world if we're not taking actions. And generally, my sense is if we're not being in communication. So my view at this point in my life is that the world shifts in communication. So for someone with an idea, it could just be the next step is just to speak to a really trusted friend who I know is not going to pull all the holes inside of my idea, but is actually going to help me expand on my idea. Action is, I do a lot of work with women in business, and I often talk about what is the action that is just going to move the needle. It could be a conversation. It could be something basic. It's generally around a conversation around clients or sharing your vision or taking the first step. So when people are taking action, it seems like things, the universe, God, self, serendipity, whatever language, aligns to sort of help you. It's like you're going down a river, flowing in the direction you need to go. So things begin to move with velocity. And that's what I'm also really interested in. How do we fulfill on what we're passionate about, but with ease and not heaps of hard work and effort, but just with velocity? And that taking actions, even when it's really hard and you're not getting results, is the key. Even if there were some ideas we had for Raise the Roof that I was like, yes, this is the way we need to solve this problem and this initiative will make a difference, and it didn't. But we were just in action, in momentum, as you mentioned. So there's all the thinking in the world is fabulous, all the pondering, a bit controversial, but you can have your business plans written out and all of your documentation and your roadmaps, and all of that is really wonderful. But it makes no difference if you're not taking action or taking the in reality next step to cause a result. And that's what I'm way more interested in. So with, this is quite telling about how I operate. I didn't do heaps of research when I went to Tanzania. I just had a knowing I was going to do that. With Raise the Roof, the plan wasn't necessarily clear. It started with me acknowledging, saying, I'm going to build an orphanage, and going, yikes, what's the next step to that? Having a conversation with my brother, and then speaking to a heap of my good friends and family. And we just created a board and it began. 25, I had no idea how to build an orphanage or run an organization, or it just was a matter of what is the next step to take. And it is simple and complex because the thing that you have to deal with is your brain that is sabotaging us all day, all the time, and sometimes very obviously and it's very clear, and sometimes in a very subtle way. And that is what stops people from taking action, actually. It's very rarely that someone has a really terrible, awful, ridiculous idea that's never going to work.
As somebody who has those ideals all the time, I like to push forward and actually see what happens.
Yeah.
Because you never know where you go. Do you think, as you reflect back, and I love that you said, sometimes you got to look back because you can't ever connect the dots looking forward.
Yeah.
Right? When you took those decisions you took at 21 or in your early 20s, with experience now, do you think life may have held you back a little? Do you think life may have shown you a few challenges, tricky situations, other opportunities? Because sometimes we burden ourselves with experience, knowledge, intelligence, insight, responsibility, a network of people. But I see young people still taking really good, spontaneous decisions and then being resilient enough to know when it's not for them, or when resilient enough to know when they need to pivot.
Yeah. A really powerful capacity is to know when to quit. And sometimes it is about pivoting, or, wow, okay, I've been going at this for 2 years. I'm not willing to do what it takes to have this business work. I'm going to try something else. So knowing when to stop is really powerful. If I reflect back and people ask me, Danielle, I'm thinking of starting a charity, my first response now is do not do that. Just align with another organization. Do not start your own and go through that process. So I'm grateful that I was naive to that back then, because now what I know about governance and running them and chairing and AGMs and all of the governance that is required to run a charity, you'd be crazy. I mean, it was crazy to start one at 25. It makes no sense. Like, what an insane thing to do. But that word or purpose, likely purpose, but I didn't know purpose. I just knew I said, I'm going to build an orphanage. What does shape the actions that we take? So we can look back for purpose, but then we have the power of our word and what our commitment is. So my commitment of I'm going to build an orphanage had me show up and take actions and be in particular ways that had me not be able to stop in that instance. And at the beginning of the project, I had, I think, 3 or 4 A4 pages of every single time there was a hurdle or someone said, you know what, Danielle, it's okay if you actually don't do this. But after we started the charity, I gave my word to the organisation in Botswana and said, I don't know how long this is going to take, but we're going to build a house. I'm going to raise a heap of money. We're going to invest this money with you. We're going to partner with you, and we're going to do something that creates sustainable income and transforms what's possible for these children. And there was no way. For me, the alternative of quitting was to then have to go, if I was really going to honour my word, and we can talk more about that whenever you choose, but if I was really going to honour my word, that would mean calling them up and dealing with the impact of me not honouring my word. And that seemed way more difficult. And my word to the Canberra community, because people had donated money, donated time. We'd built this beautiful house that we sold to generate profits. It was like the task of actually undoing my word, that just was not an option. The only way forward was, what is the next step to try and navigate this? And there were governance challenges with having money go from Australia to Botswana. Like, it is a whole wonderfully bureaucratic and important process, but very frustrating. So a question we had for around maybe 14 years was, I do not know how to get the money out of Australia in a way that was legal and would align with all of our requirements here. And of course, I wasn't going to get the money out of Australia doing it in a way that didn't have integrity for me. So when I did that personal development work and really started to reflect on what I wanted to do with my life and what was next, knowing that at 21, 22, I said I wanted to build an orphanage, that was right there in my mind as something that I'd thought. And I probably told people when I came back from that trip, I really wanted to do something to make a difference. So I had a conversation with my brother, and he, at that point, I think when this happened, it was 2009 after the bushfires had come through Canberra. And he is a builder, and he said, I would love to build a home and just give it to a family in need. And I said, well, that's a great idea. When can we do that? Well, he was 27, so just starting out in his business, and was like, well, I can't afford to do that yet. So somehow the conversation morphed into supporting Starlight to grant wishes for seriously ill children in Canberra and the surrounding regions, because my brother Lincoln, one of his friends, was very unwell, got a wish through one of those wish granting charities, and then ended up dying, I think, but got a whole lot of, like, a games room, got this really cool games room. And Brittany, my friend who died at 21, she got a wish when she was younger, and she went to SeaWorld. It's a very common wish, and got to swim with the dolphins. So I saw the difference that made for her. So Lincoln and I had made a decision that half of the funds that we raised would go to support the Starlight Children's Foundation and provide wishes for our local community, because local really mattered. And the other half of the money would go and support orphan children in Botswana. So that process, it took us, we had the conversation, started our board, got a constitution, figured out what we had to do legally. It took 4 years to get land for us to build. It took a while to get the plans ready. Then we had more than 450 businesses contribute to that project. We had, I think we ended up spending maybe around $100,000 and built a home that was worth about $850,000. So the rest was from people donating, contributing their time. Because Lincoln and I were really clear on, we wanted to give anyone who wanted to be a part of this project an opportunity to contribute in whatever way they could. And because we were young, we didn't have access to the network of, here's $100,000 from some rich human somewhere. So it was done kind of piecemeal and took a long time to build a house. So that process really took something to stay resilient and keep going, even though I didn't think the house would be finished. I didn't know if it would be sold. And there was this lingering question of how, even if we sell this, how do we get the money to where we said we're going to get the money? How are we actually going to do this? But I just sort of put that in the back of my mind and just kept going to get the house built. And then we got the house sold, and then COVID hit. And then, last year, or the year before, 2004, I think it was, we got to make the first major donation legally.
That's a beautiful purpose, and you've got to navigate lots of paperwork and stay resilient and stay on the path. Something I think people forget when we hear stories like that is, what is the personal sacrifice like for you? What are you sacrificing to achieve this, to keep your word?
This is really interesting around sacrifice or not, and probably depends on where you look around that. For me, honoring my word was uncomfortable at times. And it was interesting at how often people are ready to support you and give you an out. So it's all right, Danielle. You don't actually have to follow through with this. It is really hard. Why don't you just donate all the money to Starlight? It's a very easy donation to make. They're an Australian organisation, very easy. Why don't you just give it all to Starlight? Like, or what if we just find another organisation? Like, do you really have to give it to SOS Children's Villages in Botswana, or can we give it to somebody else? So there were always outs around me. I'm not sure what I sacrificed, and I could look back and make up a story maybe about what I sacrificed. But knowing myself as a woman who tries to honor her word, and it's tough to honor your word, had all sorts of incredible opportunities show up for me. But it did mean I couldn't just be in a boring 9-to-5 job. That's part of the issue with who I am and being inspired in the way that I get inspired by things is I can't just do every day 9-to-5. And that would be lovely because that seems sometimes like an easier path in some aspects. I often talk about Raise the Roof was kind of like my baby, who is now 16 years old. So I feel like I've raised a child in, not the same, of course, but that project's been a 16-year project. I had to do a lot of work on me, distinguish what was in the way, what do I need to do to come back to being inspired or brave or courageous, or like I had to really remove me, my machinery, my identity, that part of my brain that wanted to have me quit or keep me small. I had to deal with that constantly. That is tough work, but it was great training because I feel like now that I've done that, no work-based situation feels as challenging as it was with Raise the Roof.
And I think that is also an important reflection because most of the time we forget to work on us.
Yeah.
And we forget the amount of work that's justified, that we deserve. But we don't do it. We are distracted by other things. And sometimes we sit and wonder, why am I feeling like this?
Yeah.
Because I didn't invest the time in me.
Yeah.
What has that taught you from that dream, vision, or purpose you had in your early 20s to actually keeping your word now? What has that taught you about the journey?
My sense, and I say things like my sense, my view at this point in time, because all of this is constantly evolving. I don't know that anyone can be an extraordinary leader causing impactful results in the world without doing a heap of personal development. I wasn't necessarily grateful at the time because dealing with yourself is tough. Dealing with your reptilian brain is tough. It's really tough. And the payoff and the benefit can't be measured or quantified and this is a lifelong journey and I'm still going, and I'm sure there'll be other events in my life that will have a whole new level of needing to, uncover whatever there is for me to uncover. But through this project, get to have a baseline of who I actually am and what I am capable of that I would never have had access to if I hadn't have taken on a project like this. And, I've done quite a lot of uni. I know I can study. Like, being able to study or being able to run a business or, being a good person. Fulfilling on a big purpose that takes a lot in all different energy, work, all of the different facets. There's something that is made available that I get to reflect on around who I am. And if I said this to my parents a few months back, my poor parents probably completely freaked out. I said, I want you two to know that if I die, I am really proud of what I've fulfilled on in my life, and I'm really happy. And not happy like crappy circumstances don't happen, because they do, and there's loss and all of what life is made up of, but what honoring my word in service of something that had not much to do with me has offered is a real gift. And that is available to everyone. There's nothing special about me. There's nothing special about me. I just went, I'm giving my word and I'm going to do what it takes to honor it, even when it's really hard and I want to run away and quit. And some days I would just be like, I'm not taking any actions today. I just need a break. So I would pause the project. There were times in the project where there was nothing really happening. But I was also mindful to be in conversation with people that I knew would be a stand for me as well. And I remember one of my really good friends early on, when I was like this, I just don't see how this is going to happen. She held the vision for me when I couldn't. And having an environment around me like that was incredibly powerful. My dad was also amazing about that. My dad's a builder, and him and mum built our family home. And it took them like 3 years because he was working full time. There's 5 kids in our family. And he just said, I just knew we would get there. And on the days that he had no faith, mum was like, just keep going and you will get there. And so they held that space for Raise the Roof as well. Like, it's okay, Danielle, just what's the next step? Just keep, it's going to happen. And sometimes I just needed that from people when it just looked like this was this impossible task that was never going to happen. I needed a community to just remind me and have faith. And it was so incredible because the CEO of SOS, when I told him, the organization in Botswana, we were going to do this, I was reflecting on this and was moved to tears thinking about this. He and another incredible woman there, Clara, trusted the word of a 25-year-old. So I don't know what I said or what my way of being was or my operating or what it was that had them trust me. But they held on to, she's going to do this, whenever it is, however she does it. And they're like, what a gift from them. It took 15 years. So I would check in and be like, we've just started building the house. We've finally got land. It's going to take another whatever. We've just sold it. We're trying to figure out how to get the money over in a legal way. But it's like they honored the truth of my word the whole time. So it was such a moment when I said, hey, send me your bank account details. We're ready to make the payment. But I'm present to the power of other people holding that for me and my brother throughout this whole project, and the difference it makes to be that for someone else. Like, you've actually got this, and it doesn't matter that we don't know how this is going to happen. You're going to do this. Yeah, it was really remarkable, especially when I'm like, organizations, people tell them they're going to do stuff all the time. I'm going to do this fundraiser. I'm going to raise this much money. I'm going to donate. And a lot of the time people don't do what they say, but they trusted my word. I think that's also why I didn't want to break it with them, because they were counting on us at Raise the Roof. Like, they were counting on that for their children. So there was a lot at stake.
While you had that purpose, I also love how you've shared what momentum means to you. I grew up in Sri Lanka. I lost my dad when I was about 3.5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My mom raised us, and my vision or my clarity of momentum has always been slightly different to what everybody else thinks. It's gathering pace and moving forward. I'm like, not always. Sometimes you need to know that you can't be the front runner. You need somebody else to hold the torch and run for you while you catch your breath a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to know I just need someone to hold my hand and walk with me. I don't want someone to lead. Just give me the strength to walk with me.
Mm?
And all of those beliefs growing up in Sri Lanka, you're talking about being a young person in Australia. So I think globally we are connected through whatever it is, purpose drives us.
Yeah.
And the ability for somebody to trust your word, whoever you are.
Mm?
I think sometimes you need to trust people.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful story that you came through. You worked constantly on it. And this is no disrespect to anybody who has not been able to keep a word. Sometimes life gets in the way. You have a career break. You have terrible things happen to you. Or you have great things happen to you.
Yeah.
You have children and you get distracted and you caught raising them.
Totally.
Those things all happen. Tell me about how has your family responded? Because they've been around, they've been close as you delivered on a commitment you made.
Yeah.
How has that response and that strength been for you?
Oh boy, this is the question that'll make me cry. And I have no issue with crying. So, tears will come out of my eyes and I'm fine with that. So it was my brother and I, but my whole family, there's 5 children, mum and dad, my cousin was on the board. I mean, the whole family got dragged along with all of this. And I remember at one point,
I love the honesty because it is dragged along with
there
this.
was no, and I remember my dad saying, listen, you do however you want to make a difference in the world, but just please, just leave me out of it. Like, just leave me alone. My dad is a fabulous man with Italian parents. And anyway, as we were getting to the end of the house, the construction of the house, my younger brother was heavily involved. My brother, who's the co-founder, was leading the project. And then at one point, my dad took 6 months off work to contribute to make sure that we got the project done. And I hope they don't mind that I'm just sharing all this stuff about them. But at one point, my dad was sitting talking to me and he just acknowledged how proud he was to be a part of that project. And our goal at the onset of the project was never that it was my project or my brother Lincoln's project. It was never actually about us. And so when other people got that it was theirs and got to be proud of their contribution, that was just so profound. So mum and dad would host our board meetings at their house all the time, would get snacks. Mum was on the board. She would help, she spoke to jewelers to get these beautiful pieces. Jewelry is my mum's thing. Get these beautiful pieces of jewelry donated and diamonds and rubies and all sorts of things. I think she even donated some of her own jewelry to create something. So they've just been a part of it. All the breakdowns. This is too hard. I can't do it. The wins, the planning at the gala ball. Mum, can you quickly get this? I forgot this. Dad, can you help me set up the room? We need this. They just all, whether they wanted to be or not. And my family's partners at the time and cousins. And it really taught me, it's really interesting reflecting. So thank you for some of these really great questions because I'm reflecting in ways and seeing things I haven't seen before. In Botswana, my experience there is that the culture is given by community. It might be similar in Sri Lanka, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to create community or try to be community. You're just given by community. What the Raise the Roof project did was show me the power of community. So that you have people walking beside you. You have people leading. There were times when and we had incredible people doing our comms and PR and event management, thank goodness, that were just running with projects and owning it. So it was impossible without it being a whole community. And that took not having ego show up where we could. Because if Danielle, back before she knew anything about her identity and winning formulas and what sets her up for success, would have been, I have to do this on my own. It has to be good enough. And I can't ever upset anybody ever in the process of doing this. Those 3 ways of operating would never have enabled the project to go forward. So I had to deal with being a control freak, having it be about my ego, because it didn't come from my ego. So when my ego stepped in, it was like, how do I deal with this? This isn't about me and what I want. There was straight, tough conversations at times, asking people for things or saying no, to maybe around integrity. Sometimes honoring word look like, I don't know that they're a good fit to be a partner for us. If people aren't really aligned and feeling it how we are, I don't know that I want them to sponsor, or I don't know that that's who we want in our community. So, and we had to deal with stuff like that. And it would be easier to just anyone who just happy to give us some money. Like there were shortcuts, but those shortcuts weren't aligned with integrity or my word or the word of our community and the word of our board. So yeah, we just couldn't do that.
You've led this incredible project and you're still leading it. What has that? Give me 3 lessons it has taught you about being a leader.
Leadership is about understanding yourself and others, and the importance and what it takes to actually inspire or enroll or encourage other people to take aligned action. You've got to deal with yourself a lot. The second thing about leadership is, for me, part of this conversation about integrity, and I talk about integrity a lot, is you have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So I can't pretend that everyone should be inspired if I'm really not. Like, what showed up for me was mirrored to others. So I can't expect other people to behave in a way if I'm not going to take that on myself. And I think the other part about leadership is it makes a difference to be given by a future that you're working towards, and having that shape your actions, your behavior, like your speaking. That is powerful in leadership. Having that vision or that purpose or that proposed new environment or situation, like whatever we're out to cause as leaders, having that be what guides you is very powerful and a great deterrent from all the noise in your head. Yeah.
How do you manage the noise in your head?
I have a coach. I've had a coach every week for many years now. I constantly am connected into different personal development. I'm always reading some leadership book on something to do with high performance or something in the realm of spirituality. I work in the space of having conversations that deals with the voice in other people's heads. So that's great, because in my courses, whatever the topic is, I end up dealing with that topic. The topic of the week shows up in my life, so I am dealing with that. But I think our brain is really clever, and it is so keen to have us survive. And that's around being safe and procreating most of the time, continuing the species. That part of the brain has no care for fulfillment or contentment or joy. And so part of what it is recognizing when it's a play, and then having tools to not let it totally take over. And sometimes it still does, and I've got to clean that up and apologize, or, get back on the horse or take the next action or whatever else. But there is something very powerful around having awareness of what are our little sabotages and where do they show up, and getting very present to the impact of that. I think when we're clear on the impact of when our identity or our reptilian brain is at play, it's very hard to avoid. It's almost like you see something that you cannot unsee, and there's like a visceral feeling for me when I am frustrated, annoyed, pretending like everything's okay. It isn't. I feel it in my body in such a way now that I know when something's at play. And sometimes that just looks like, I just need to let you know I'm super triggered right now, or I'm really frustrated, or I am, sometimes with my coach, I'm like, I am not liking what you're saying right now. I'm really not a fan of what you're saying. I'm just going to go quiet for a little bit because I'm very activated by what you're saying. So, it's not like I make it wrong or there's anything. It's just like, wow, I am really reactive. This is interesting. Something is going on here that I'm very activated right now.
You spoke about reading. You spoke about the leadership books that you engage with and how it gives you a sense of moving forward, that continuous learning. What are you currently reading?
Let me just first say, I am not an avid reader at all. I very rarely can handle audiobooks because sometimes I just need no noise in my brain if I've been using my brain a lot, except when I'm driving. So for me, reading takes real discipline. It's not something I love doing. I just know the benefit of what I get out of it when I do read. So the current book that I'm reading now is from Barbara Annis, and it's called Gender Intelligence. And it's pulling on research that's looked at the brain differences between the biological male brain, biological female brain, and then is also looking at what they call bridge brains. So it could be someone who has traits that are more male-brained but are in a female body and vice versa. And my understanding is they're looking at some of the other genders and how that is manifested in some of this research. So for me, that is incredibly interesting around, but there can be this conversation that we're wired the same, but what the research is pointing to is actually no, we're not. And there are different areas of brains based on biology that are that are larger, smaller, and how that shapes how people operate. And why I'm interested in that is because there are incredible differences that we all have. And what if we could harness those differences instead of that being a divide or being a problem or being who's right, who's wrong? What if we could harness those differences and understand those differences to create cultures that work for all, whether that is gender or biology, rather, if we want to talk about the brain science, or gender or cultural, religious, disability, like the whole gamut of difference. What would it look like if we understood more about that to really just harness that and see what is made possible? So that's the book that I'm reading at the moment.
From your experience working with leaders, how many leaders take the time to reflect on how they are wired, what their brain is like, what their biochemistry is like, how their brain used to fire, when they were building their career, but how their brain starts firing now when they're in a different season? What are your experiences?
Well, we could look at the definition of leader. So a leader can be anyone in any sector doing anything. And I don't speak about leader like a role or manager or CEO. I mean, that's a title. But if we take it that leaders are people who cause aligned action to fulfill on a vision or a future or a purpose or something, and do so in a powerful way, then I would say I work with a lot of leaders and have a lot of leaders in my life. And people are leading in many aspects in their life. The work I do and my view of really extraordinary leaders is that they do work, that they can't escape it. Whether that's reading podcasts, snippets on social media, that deep reflective thinking it's just critical, I think, and not just in a business context, but if you're operating from automated beliefs that you got in your childhood or whatever else, that causes problems in relationships, in our relationship with money, health, well-being, happiness. It's the whole gamut. So most of the people, well, anyone I work with now, because of the work that I do, play in this space. which makes it very fun. And they're either entry level and haven't done any work before, which is also really fun as a facilitator. Or there are people that have done a lot of work, which is also fun for me because it's like, how do we go to that next level beyond what they've seen? Like, what is there to uncover for them to elevate their performance in places where they may be limited or thwarted or stopped?
What are the systems they need to have to set them up with enough time and bandwidth to engage in that personal development?
Look, for everyone, that's really different. We all have a limited amount of time, and it's really how we prioritize that time. I have invested a lot financially in personal development and books and reading and seminars and learning and coaching. And my sense is it causes results to show up with velocity. So the biggest complaints for most people is if only they had the money and only they had the time. But generally underneath that, there is something more sinister at play that is stopping people from prioritizing work. And for some people, it's a fear of, I don't want to have to uncover what's like, there's this concern that even sometimes people work with me, I'm like, we are not going to go through we're not going to go through all of your childhood traumas. It's not the work that I do. There's people that do that work. But I think people have a fear about that, or are actually just unwilling to confront looking at themselves and taking different actions and what that would mean about how they live. So we could be a victim to our circumstances. Well, one day when the kids are older, or one day when I'm making more money, or one day when I'm not working 9 till 5, or one day when I've got a less stressful job. But that's all sort of out here. Like, the world gets to dictate how you live your life and what you prioritize. And so people just need to own what you want to prioritize. And absolutely, there are, I have a particular compassion and empathy for mothers. I think, when they are also trying to run businesses or work and manage a household and raise children and do all of the things, it's like a massive, massive, massive load. And there can be a whole lot of behaviors that we are doing that are sabotaging and making that even worse than it needs to be. And so an investment of time in exploring some of what's going on in those patterns can cause an incredible difference. There's been women in my program that have been mothers that are now more present with their children, have better boundaries at work and home, and are still succeeding and kicking goals and causing incredible results. But some of the thinking that keeps us stuck, like I can't afford it or I don't have time, it's the excuse we use for everything. All we have is time. That's kind of all we have. So what do you choose to spend it on? Most people spend a lot of time on social media. Most people, we all have our ways where we waste time. So it's very rarely a sufficient justification in a conversation with me around I don't have time. Yeah.
How do you guide someone over that initial hump? Because sometimes it's a difficult one to reflect on, to say, actually, I've spent a lot of time just scrolling. Or, I said I didn't have 20 minutes, but I drive from the north of Canberra to the city. That's 20 minutes that I can actually listen to a podcast. I can spend another 2 minutes in the car writing the 3 things I actually learned from it before I get into office on time. Mm-hmm. How do you help people reflect on what they're spending time on and take control or take more ownership of their time?
I work with people who are willing and have the ability to be in these types of conversations, because I can be pretty straight up with people and I will ask questions that can be confronting for people, which is what I want to do. I want to shine a light on a blind spot that people can't see, and I want to interrupt the machinery. Like, it's hard to interrupt that very protective brain. So my first criteria for working with people is like, are you actually willing to do the work? One of the ways for people to get very clear about what is happening, I talk a lot about around dealing with reality. So in our brain, we may have it that we're very busy. Our brain's telling us we're very busy. But where are we actually spending our time? So that could look like just track your time for like 2 days. What do you actually spend your time doing? And just that process of tracking it and bringing awareness to it could be enough to cause someone to go, wow, I realized I just spend like 3 hours every night on my phone. So often the biggest piece is just an awareness of what we are doing, or how much time, a question I ask a lot is, how much time have you spent thinking about doing that thing? We are spending so much time. It's really interesting. I can't remember what book it was that I was reading, maybe around habits, atomic habits, maybe. And it talks about loops, open loops in our brain. So every time there's something on our to-do list that isn't on a to-do list or isn't scheduled into our calendar, loops in our brain and spends brain energy because our brain is trying to figure out what to do with it. So I often say to people, how long have you been thinking about sending that email? Like, what if you could just send the email? And part of that, what if you could just send the email, is kind of the work that I do with people. Like, what is actually in the way that is stopping you from sending that email? And how much time are you spending worrying about the email that you need to send instead of just sending it? So I would get people to actually, in reality, look at what are they doing with their time. The other thing people could reflect on is, if there is something you really want and your excuse or justification or rationale is you don't have enough time, what is the cost of that on you, actually? What impact is that having on your self-expression, your freedom, your feeling content, happiness, joy? And then if you really want to really have a good look at the impact, speak to the people around you. What is the impact of your loved ones of seeing you struggling or not fulfilled or making excuses and justifications? Because there's a huge impact on others of those ways of being and operating as well, but we do not look there. And we very rarely ask people what the impact is. But if we got curious about that for other people, again, it's like one of those moments where you can't really hide from that.
The biggest distraction to someone's future, in my opinion, is not their competition. It's the distractions they insist on keeping in their lives.
Yeah.
How do people identify distractions in their lives?
Well, I think before we identify, it's almost like, what is the purpose or what is the life you want? Because if we're not quite clear on where we're going, then if we don't have a compelling, it can be said that if we don't have a compelling future pulling us towards it, then what's driving us is all stuff from the past in our brain. It's comfort and it's safety. And our brain is wired to enjoy pleasure and avoid pain. So having something you really want to do, it's amazing. So I have people say things like, oh, Danielle, I don't know if I can afford to do your training. It's very expensive, or whatever conversation they have about money. And I said, not a problem. And if your favorite musician was performing at the house next door, but you had to pay the same amount to get a ticket to go meet them, what would you do? Oh, well, I would ask my family, I would get the money, I would do this, I would save, I would get a loan. So it's really clear for me then, it's like, so it's not about money, just like it's not really about time. I spend time on social media, probably too much, but I'm very purposeful with the time that I allocate to be fulfilling on what I want to be fulfilling on. So my view is not necessarily scrap social media, don't watch TV, don't Netflix binge, I mean, that level of being on and productive every second of the day doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for my inspiration, my creativity, and my energy levels. I just cannot do that. But again, it's looking at what takes you out. So sometimes that is, I'm going to avoid dealing with a difficult situation in a relationship, and I'm just going to scroll through social media because I don't want to have to deal with it. So if I was working with someone around that, I'd be like, let's deal with what you're actually avoiding. So what is it and what's the cost? And for how long do you want to do this for? So I very rarely have advice for people. I don't really operate in the world of advice. The space I'm in is the world of inquiry. So getting people to reflect on what is really going on that has me be distracted like that. What am I actually avoiding? And that's probably a really powerful question for people to ask. What am I really avoiding by watching social media or whatever we do? And what is that reinforcing? And often, maybe, when we avoid taking actions aligned with what we want to do, then that gets to reinforce in our brain, see, you're a loser, you're a failure. Look at those people on social media making all that money, not good enough, blah, 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 blah. It's just like all this evidence for our brain to hold on to. So that's like another cost that we don't often consider is, what is the real, in reality, cost of letting ourselves be totally distracted? I was working with someone once, and they said to me that they just get, it was either headaches or something. And look, for some people, of course, they have medical conditions, and I'm not inferring this for anything, but this person was really interested. And I said, when did you first start? It wasn't that. I think she said she would just black out a bit, kind of just check out. I said, when did you first start doing that? And that was totally linked to a trauma when she was younger. And so her way of responding, if she was confronted by something, was like her brain had learned just kind of check out and disassociate. Now, that's not a problem. And that was a really great strategy that the brain came up with when it needed to in a moment of trauma. However, as a 30-something-year-old woman who, wanted to progress and fulfill on whatever her vision was that she wanted to fulfill on, that was totally impacting her capacity to do that. So we had a look at her. She just assumed, oh, that's just what I do. I just kind of black out. And I was like, awesome. Well, let's see if we can interrupt that. If we can't, not a problem. But what had happened is that also became a very convenient way for her to avoid not major traumatic, awful, terrible things as a 30-something-year-old, but it was just a way to avoid not being responsible for something, not having a difficult conversation. So the brain had almost taken creative free rein with that to totally be sabotaging her in what she's up to now. So we have all sorts of that stuff going on.
And I love the fact that us as adults, when we invest in ourselves, it's not always about learning. Sometimes it's about that pattern interrupt. Sometimes it's about a little bit of unlearning.
Totally.
How do you structure your conversations with the people that you work with to be transformational and not just simply transactional?
Yeah, so transactional conversations are more like getting someone to do something. It's quite task-oriented. Transformational conversations are not that.
And they're uncomfortable.
Can be incredibly uncomfortable for people. In fact, to create the environment for a transformational conversation or for transformation to occur often takes really kind of pushing in on people is the language I use. And there's a particular design around transformational conversation. So in my programs, having people feel safe to be vulnerable is really important, because put in the wrong hand, people could do all sorts of stuff, messing with people. It's not what I'm interested in. Lots of those conversations are inquiry-based, or ask very specific questions and ask questions that have people look in a place they haven't looked before. We sort of want to mess with the automaticness of the brain. So that's what I try and do in some of my conversations, is interrupt the ordinary just mundane brain that does its thing. My sense is we spend a lot of time just with automated thoughts. Some of them probably aren't even really ours. Who knows where they came from? It's like beliefs and opinions. It's like, is this actually what I believe, or was I just raised to believe this? Like, where is this from? What I'm trying to do is have people think in new ways. And if and when I can master that, have people think from a more profound place or from a more profound perspective. So then people have an insight or they discover something they'd never seen before. But if we just leave it there, nothing happens. Then it almost can become a transactional conversation. Great. Now, what are you going to do differently now that you've seen this? Otherwise, we just have these great insights and more information and more information and more information, but it makes no difference because the actions we take don't shift. So a lot of my conversations are designed around, let's see what's getting in the way and let's see how we can shift something so you can take an action you've never taken before. And then, predictably, they're going to get a different result.
For someone who wants to go on a journey like that of transformation, how should you prepare yourself? We said it's going to be uncomfortable, but how should you prepare yourself?
I don't know that you can. I think things like make sure you get good sleep. Totally make sure you try and get good sleep before you start anything like that, because doing this work with an exhausted brain is not fun. And I say that because I've been there. And sometimes if I'm in a 3-day course or something and I don't get a really great night's sleep, boy, does all of the stuff show up the next day, which can also be beneficial. But I think, make sure you get good sleep. And then there's really something about being willing to be uncomfortable, like it's a roller coaster. You will get off the roller coaster, and I promise, and this is my commitment to people I work with, I promise you will end up somewhere where whatever uncomfortability was worth it. And the uncomfortability isn't even that intense. Like it's like, I don't even know how you would describe it, but sometimes I think we are so uncomfortable in our life in an environment where we're just disassociating, for example, that is more uncomfortable and impactful than just being challenged in our thinking and thought. But I think you have to get straight with yourself about whether you're willing to look, and are you willing to bring beginner's mind? Because if you come in super arrogant, like you know everything, one, that's very interesting because that is probably a very strong identity and strategy people have to, assert themselves or be smart enough, good enough, dominate. But you've got to really be willing to be coached and to trust someone.
You defined leadership. I look at leadership again based on how I grew up and where I was raised as a leader, whatever role they had, earned respect. A leader held space for you, but a leader was always honest, even if they had to tell you a truth that was going to be uncomfortable. How can someone reflect on their day-to-day operations as a leader? What are some of those telltale signs you need to look at to make sure you are operating at your best? I love the advice you gave on sleep, because I think that's really important. And lots of good leaders work really hard.
Yeah.
But they can't consistently show up at their best because they're just not rested.
Yeah.
What are some of those things leaders need to have and be conscious of to show up at their best?
Well, before we get to that, I'm just going to challenge a little bit around leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that there is any particular way a leader needs to be all the time. And I think we can set up really insane expectations for us inside of how a leader should always be. I consider myself a leader and I'm not always patient. I am not always great. I am not always super compassionate. I am not always a great listener. I mean, depending on where I'm at, what I'm doing, who I be as a leader shifts, including values like honesty. So there may be if I think about the Defence Forces, for example, times where the most strategic way to progress with an intention is absolutely not to tell the truth, especially to an enemy. So I use that as an extreme example because there are values I aspire to have as a leader, but it is impossible for me to always be all of it all of the time. And some situations, if leadership is really about fulfilling on your vision or whatever it is, then I look at what has integrity for me and what way of being. Like, what if leadership is an ability to be any way of being that's required? Straight up, kind, lying if that is, I don't know if that's required. I mean, yeah, it's so interesting because the lying one gets very divisive. But there may be environments where you actually can't tell the truth, or it doesn't work, or it's not safe to tell the truth. I think also in some like medical professions, if there's a abusive partner or something, a very excellent health professional may need to lie to the partner to keep their patient safe. So I don't think it's as black and white as that. I think when we're assessing the degree to how we perform as leadership, I was actually thinking about this, like what would a checklist around leadership look like? And for me, that would look like something like, did I honor my word? Not keep my word, but did I honor it? So if I couldn't keep my word, did I clean up or deal with whatever consequences there are for other people in not keeping my word? I would look at that. I would probably track how well did I listen and how present was I in my conversations with people today. I might look at things like how many actions did I take that were really aligned to where I was going. And then I could reflect on what were the different ways I was being throughout the day, and was that intentional, or where was I kind of taken out? They might be, I'd have to do more thinking around that, but they might be some of the metrics that I would look at in regards to my leadership and how influential or how successful was I in having other people take aligned actions, the aligned actions they needed to take to fulfill on what we're out to achieve. That might be, and one last question would be something like, to what extent did I honor me? Did I honor myself? Which is things like sleep. Some people can operate on 4 hours sleep. So telling them to sleep 8 hours, that some people just don't need that. Some people sort of it doesn't work for me to tell people, what's my morning routine or what's your morning, because everyone's routine is different, and some like reading at night, morning, and exercising and doing whatever they do. But that question around, to what extent did I honor me? That would be a very interesting measure for leadership, because if I am authentically honoring like who I really am, my sense is when I do that, that honors everyone around me. Even though people may not like that and might be uncomfortable and they don't get what they want or whatever else. But I'm really interested in honoring self as a key aspect to leadership.
Most leaders value openness.
Mm-hmm.
But when their beliefs get challenged, they shut down. How should leaders change some of their mindset, their thinking, to be able to operate in those scenarios, even though their beliefs have been challenged, and even though they don't need to always share those same beliefs?
Mm-hmm.
How should a leader operate in a situation like that?
Well, here's what I've been exploring for myself around openness. I think it's very easy for us to think we're very open, very, very open. But when I really started to interrogate that through some other work I was doing and started to think about, how open am I actually to difference of political views? And how open am I really around different religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs or anything in that realm? And sometimes it can be easy if someone says, I think you should do it this way, Danielle, and I think we should do it this way. It's very easy to be open and flexible. But my view of what's going on in the world is there is a huge divide everywhere. It is us versus them and us versus them, whether it's culture, religion, politics, gender. It's just everywhere, us versus them. And what does it take to really listen in a way that you park all of your beliefs, ideas, opinions, which who knows where they've come from? So much of that's just almost been absorbed by osmosis. Like I had beliefs about, how, women should behave, how men should behave, what is gender, what is disability, like all these beliefs that just, I don't really know where they came from. It's just like they're just in my brain. So what does it take for me to park all of that and to get in someone's world and from their worldview so that I can actually understand how and why that person has the view or opinion that they have? If we really want to be influential as leaders, and I'm taking this more to some of those big divisive topics that are very loud at the moment, what would it take for me as a human to be able to listen and be willing to shift my views to something that is so far from what I believe? Like, what would it take for my own evolution to be able to do that? And that, I mean, imagine if leaders all around the world were actually willing to do that. But that is incredibly challenging. One, you have to identify all of your own stuff that's coming up. I'm right, I can't believe. For me, there's also acknowledging I live in a realm where a lot of the information I get is skewed to beliefs I already have. It just keeps fulfilling my beliefs, which is great. But if I'm having a conversation with someone else who's getting all their information filtered through their lens, fulfilling their beliefs, then how do we ever bring harmony actually? And it's interesting looking at wars that are happening or beginning to stop around the world. The world is so quick to say they should be compassionate, they should understand each other's views and beliefs, and we should all accept each other's religions and political beliefs, and war shouldn't happen and people shouldn't get harmed. And without a doubt, absolutely. However, I wonder, maybe that is just an extreme example of what we're all actually running around doing. I'm right, you're wrong, I'm different to you. This is how it should be. That's not how it should be. You're an idiot. You're delusional. Your thinking is pathetic. I can't possibly believe you think like that. You must be, insert whatever adjective you want to insert to explain, the view of who somebody is. What does it really take to shift your political views? Like, what would it really take for me to totally shift my political views? And that inquiry is one that I'm in. Like, what kind of listening would I need to bring? What kind of beginner's mind would I need to bring? How much of my own assumptions would I need to challenge to actually be willing not to adopt those beliefs, but to be able to get an understanding from someone else's perspective to see how that view makes sense for them without judging or diminishing them? What if leaders did that for everything? What if that was the game of listening and openness that we practiced? And then we could really choose, where am I willing to be open and where am I not willing to be open? But actually own that, not pretend we're also open and open-minded, because my experience is we're actually really not. Very few people are. But that would give us a place to stand for ourselves around, I get that and I'm not budging on it doesn't matter what you say, I'm not budging on my belief around that. But there's a whole process to get to before I could fully stand there. That would have me need to really scrutinize all of my own beliefs, opinions, and views to actually get to that point. And I don't do that. I don't do that a lot. That's why I'm really interested in this inquiry, because it's like, what would it take for me to do that and not shut down, run away, get angry, want to argue, fight, tell them to get out of my life because that's not the kind of person I want to be hanging out with? Like, what would that take to bring harmony and connection and humanity and not have someone's beliefs or opinions be the determiner of who they are? And I have that thinking to thank someone else for, who raised that and said, Danielle, my opinions and beliefs do not define who I am. It's just my opinions and beliefs. And I was like, wow, it's actually quite profound.
What does openness look like for a leader that's at a stage that they've built organizations, they've built teams, they're now scaling up? How does that journey evolve? Even though you've now practiced that, look, I'm going to be comfortable, I'm going to be more open, I don't have to believe, I will listen, but that journey is easier said than done. Because
Totally.
like you rightly said, a lot of the things that sometimes we even stand up against robustly and protest against aren't our opinions.
Yeah.
We've just heard it over and over and over again.
Totally.
So as organizations are scaling up, how does that journey need to change for a leader? The journey of being open.
Oh, boy. This is difficult because we're speaking broadly. What's there to say is there are things that I think work. Integrity, accountability, honoring your word. It makes cultures work. It creates something that makes cultures work better than when it's missing. I think. I won't die in a ditch, but I think that's my very strong view for now. Sometimes it's not appropriate to be open, maybe. If a decision has to be made quickly, if there's an emergency, it's like, you need to go do that. I'm not having a debate about anything. You need to do that to get that done because we need to get that person into a safe environment now. We can deal with possibilities another time. So there may be some environments where there's just no space for openness. And I think, if we just said every leader should sit there and stop and reflect and be present and really inquire into every single thing all the time, it's totally impractical, not going to work. But as an organization begins to scale or its purpose becomes bigger, the current way of behaving, thinking, acting, communicating, and operating is predictably no longer going to be a match for what they're out to do. So something needs to shift. My view generally is that people have got incredible ideas and do a whole lot more thinking about things than I do. So perhaps it just begins with a conversation around, what does everyone think here? Because it's not a problem if people provide their opinions and then you still make a call. Like, at the end of the day, you've got to make a call and you need to be accountable for the call that you make. But what if leaders tried on that maybe everything that they think about how to do this might not be the best way to do it? Maybe that's the place to start. What if I'm not right about this? What is there for me to learn or discover? What if I just started there? That could be very interesting as a starting place.
You touched on culture. There's a very thin line, in my opinion, between a high-performing culture and a high-stress culture. How can you identify the differences?
Well, high performing is a really interesting term that's being thrown around a lot in regards to culture and organizations at the moment. And perhaps that is around, what does high performance actually mean? So I could be a high performer in my work life, but if I'm a really low performer in my health, well-being, my mental health, my relationships, intimate, family, friends, then how high performing am I actually in my life? So for me, high performing A high-performing culture is one where people are delivering what they said, when they said, and doing so aligned, purposeful, and intentional. If that just looked like, if the view of high performance is action, 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 result, 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 something is likely to get lost there, and that high stress culture is probably going to land. I would guess that a high-performing culture would need some level of mindfulness around how that culture is operating and a willingness to look at what are those high-value actions and what are we doing that's actually just busy work that isn't really making the difference. I think for high achievers may end up in high-performing teams, but we'd have to unpack what's really driving that need and desire for high achieving, which can be looking good, making sure people know that I'm really awesome, dealing with whatever imposter syndrome is going on. I would be really curious about what does it take to win in a high-performing culture, and then what impact is that having on people's stress? Because if we're not really clear on what's at play that's causing us to win and the game we're winning in a high-performing culture, then that can become very problematic, because it's not just about producing results quickly in action, I don't think. Shared purpose, accountability, people operating with integrity, and people being kind and decent human beings. That's what I'd be looking at. And I was talking to someone the other day about this around high-performing cultures, and said, we were talking about leadership development. And I said, if people are nailing leadership, nailing it, or seem to be very good leaders in an organization, but the rest of their life is a complete mess, then that is not what leadership is that I say. Because you can't be operating from that level when everything else in your life is a mess. So with a high-performing team, I'd be looking at, how is your honoring self going? Sleep, nutrition, rest of your life, happiness? Or is everything just being funneled into this high-performing team and no surprises that's high stress and people are burnt out? Or if that is the game people are playing, like we have got a crazy deadline we need to play to for the next month, are we all willing to give it our all for that? Maybe there's flexibility for that for short-term projects, but I would still be curious about what's the impact if people just start neglecting all the rest of their life. It just isn't going to cause workability. And not to have everything be perfect all the time, but if the game is just high-performing at work and smashing out whatever deliverable is, what's the real cost? And that's not the kind of culture I want around me. It's not how I want people around me living their life, and it's not the kind of environment I want in a work environment.
A woman in leadership has lots of challenge, lots of opportunity also to bring in change.
Yeah.
What do women in leadership need to be more open to, have more vision towards bringing change, that they know some of the changes that need to happen in a workplace, that need to happen in a culture, that some of the challenges that they've faced in their careers. But what do women in leadership need to be more conscious about as they move forward in their journeys, in their careers?
I think that there are big systemic, huge challenges for women. I mean, I just got back from Botswana, and it was interesting to reflect on challenges here versus challenges in Botswana. I was doing some work with women in leadership over there. And there are big systemic challenges. And everyone of every gender has a role to play in how we create environments that work for all of us. And that is one whole other separate conversation. What I'm interested in when working with women in leadership particularly is, what is it that they are responsible for, or where are they limited, or where are they in environments that just really don't work, or what do they need to do to bring balance so that they are operating from a place of fulfillment and at their best, at their very best version of themselves. And what are the, really, what are those limitations that we impose ourselves? Sometimes people say to me, but Danielle, why do women have to do this work? Like, why do we have to do the self-reflection and the personal development work? And I said, well, if we just want to deal with male-female brains for now, and I acknowledge that's not the reality of gender and diversity, but if my role as a leader is to be influential and be able to cause people to take the actions I want them to take to fulfill on whatever I'm out to fulfill on, if I can understand what I've got going on and can have a sense of what might be going on in the brain of the other person, I become very powerful. I'm not forceful, I'm just very powerful. And I have a higher chance of being able to influence the outcomes that I want. So my advice to women is do whatever work is required for you to be as influential as you want to be in causing the results and having the life that you want. And sometimes that environment is incredibly toxic. You actually need to leave. And when people look at why they're staying in that, it's always fascinating. Oh, they remind me of my dysfunctional mom or my dad, or, because sometimes what I have discovered is I can try and shift and change culture as much as I want. But if there is a CEO in place or a senior leader in place who is not committed to that, I will twist myself inside out trying to force a change that isn't going to happen. So also find the place where you get to be fully self-expressed and have the influence you want. That would be the beginning of a conversation I would have with women in leadership. The other thing to acknowledge is just like that gives women more power and influence, personal development should be being done by people of all genders. Like everyone should be doing that work and looking at how we can better understand ourselves and each other to cause the results that we want to be causing. So I think it's also dangerous to just put all of that responsibility on women. I think that responsibility needs to be on all of us, because could you imagine if everyone was operating from purpose, whatever that is, and from operating from their integrity around who they want to be in the world and are doing what has them be fully self-expressed and alive and alive and energized? It's almost beyond comprehension for the brain to think about what that would look like. But that, for me, is the opportunity that's available when we actually do the work, so that we're just not operating oblivious and automatically in the world, in the workplaces, and in our relationships.
From inspiration to impact is a beautiful quote I've heard.
Yeah.
Tell me about the hard parts of that journey. What does that look like?
It's so often that we have these great ideas. Like, wow, that'd be great. I'm so passionate about this. Wow, I really want to make a difference here. This is my purpose. This is my, I want that job. I want the promotion. I want to do this charity. I want to stop childhood obesity. Like, whatever it is that we get these moments of inspiration. And it's almost like that's easy. Like for some people, getting incredible ideas, the brain just generates brilliant. I mean, there are brilliant people who have great innovative ideas all the time. And that is wonderful that we have these really wonderful ideas. But to take the actions and do what it takes to actually have that play out and get to a point where an impact is being made takes something. For me, that took not quitting. And that's hard. Like, we probably, as humans, quit. When relationships get hard, we quit. We find something shiny and new and do that instead. When our diet gets too hard and we really want to eat the crappy food, we just quit. Like, quitting is very ordinary and very common. Consistency, being diligent, taking actions, honoring your word. I don't want to say it's hard because hard is not right. It's not the right word, but it takes something that is beyond ordinary. So with Raise the Roof, I mean, even my own business, when I think about my own business, I had to put practices in place for my brain to say, well, after 12 months, you can spin around in your brain around whether you want to quit this business and go and do something else. Usually it's like, I'm going to go join the public service. Maybe that'll be easier than running my own business. And likely for me would not be easier and would be far more challenging than me running my own business. But I noticed my brain, the minute something didn't go the way I want, I didn't get the number of people I wanted in a program or a workshop, or someone disagreed with an idea I had, or I put something on LinkedIn and no one liked it, or I applied for a job and I didn't get the job that I wanted. My brain has this wonderful capacity to go, that's a sign, Danielle, you should just quit. You're on the wrong path. You just need to get onto a different path. Now, luckily, I'm aware of that being my brain and not really my purpose or greater self communicating what needs to communicate. But the pull to just quit and take the easy road is the real temptation. The real temptation. And it's nice to reflect on Raise the Roof now because it's 16 years in the making. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't quit. But the practice of not quitting is, it is challenging and confronting and uncomfortable at times. And being in conversations and needing to go and have uncomfortable conversations with people, or, you know, it costs, Raise the Roof doesn't ever pay for me to fly back to Botswana. I made a commitment that Raise the Roof, the money is all used for programs, and we have the least amount of administrative overhead that we can sort of do, the bare minimum, like a website and a bank fees or whatever else, but that Raise the Roof would never pay me or any of the volunteers. So it meant an investment of my own money to go and go back to Botswana to be inspired and reconnect with my purpose or why I'm doing this. It took coaching. It took tough conversations where I had to deal with myself. It took cleaning up with the board at times and saying, you know, guys, I'm really sorry. I've been really flat and I haven't really been bringing much inspiration. It's been really hard for me. Like, that path requires me to be vulnerable and cough up where I haven't had integrity, or, you know, disclose where I've acted like a judgmental, opinionated, stubborn woman inside of what I'm doing. It takes, you know, there are times when I was completely exhausted, so I had to just Raise the Roof for some period of time. If I think about my business, you know, part of the work I want to fulfill on my purpose. I want people to be free, self-expressed, and taking actions that make a difference. Getting up every day in the face of failure requires a real level of resilience and not taking the easy path. And that's where there's real grit, and doing so with grace and honor, and not being angry at the world and blaming other people and complaining to all the people around me. And I think something that's really important to me is thinking about the power of our words and our speaking. So there is a direct correlation with my results around me being in communication. When I was talking to people about Raise the Roof would move. The project would move. When I just stopped talking about it, it would be stagnant. With my business, when I stop talking about what I do and my business just becomes stagnant. So I'd have to notice when I'm in these moments where there would be like shame or embarrassment. We didn't raise as much money as we wanted, or the project isn't going as fast as I wanted it to. Like, I would have to really deal with those ugly emotions for myself and pull myself back into being in action and being vulnerable again, if I actually wanted to make an impact. The cool thing is, and I'm going to be speaking about legacy next week or the week after, is that me and the team will never know the impact of Raise the Roof. We can have a sense of something about the difference it's made, but one of our board members joined Raise the Roof after her cousin completed suicide, and it made a profound difference to her. I will never know the impact. I will never know what legacy is left. That all remains something that's not tangible or quantifiable. And even if we said we helped this many children, it's like, well, what difference did that make for the mamas taking care of the children, or, you know, the builder who donated their whatever for the project? Like, we never know the extent of the impact of what we're causing. And that's sometimes the hardest part about going from inspiration to impact, is that you don't know when you'll get to be alerted to the impact. And sometimes with a purpose, it's an infinite game. So my impact, I hope, will continue until I die. But it also means I never get to the point of, hooray, I did the impact I wanted. Like, I don't even know what that is. And so that's challenging, because you're not getting those quick fix results, which is what the brain is wired for. Give me the dopamine hit. It's like, gosh, it took 15 years before I got a very wild dopamine hit when I was overseas that I couldn't even recognize that's what it was. So it's you're almost taking actions somewhat blindly and with hope, faith, something that you're going to get there and it's going to cause the impact, some impact that is the impact that you're committed to causing. So it's not, and people always say that, you know, the things that are most rewarding are not the easiest things in life. And it's annoying, but I'm like, I think there's something to that. Being extraordinary or choosing to play extraordinary games in the world or take on extraordinary challenges in the world that are often a lifelong commitment. If it didn't take something, everyone would be doing it. But it takes grit, and day, by moment sometimes is the reality of, well, I don't know for everybody else, but my experience. And you don't know when those moments of inspiration or moments of wow are going to show up. You just keep going, and then they just beautifully do show up sometimes. And it's, yeah, incredible when they do.
When you first made a commitment in your early 20s to support something you believed in at that moment, what would that young person reflecting back and telling you today, if they met you today, what would they say to you?
Can you ask that again?
So you made a commitment.
So 21-year-old Danielle.
Yes.
Yep.
Is going to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah.
After you've been through the 16 years of, you know, sticking to your purpose, sticking to your commitment and delivering on your word.
Yeah.
What would the 21-year-old Danielle tell you today?
Oh, that's so moving. Probably just thank you. Like, thank you for honoring what you said.
Today's the first time I've met you. The first time I have had a conversation with you that spoke about your family, the community closest to you. If you had to say something to your brother, your father, family around you, for being there, not for helping you achieve something, not for helping you drive the purpose forward, but for being there for you, what would that be?
Oof. Well.
And I'll give you an out. If you've already said it, you don't need to say it.
Yeah. So I probably, after Brittany died, took on a commitment to acknowledging people so people know who they are for me and never have to question who they are for me. And part of that is inside of, if someone dies or if I die, I want people to be not make up what they think I think of them, but I want them to know who they are for me. This is what brought me to tears actually when I was in Botswana, because we was thinking about what would be a sufficient way to acknowledge the really key contributors. That was around Raise the Roof. I wouldn't know where to begin in my life because there's so many people. But how does one acknowledge them? And I have no language for how to do that. What the level of gratitude is so deep that I just acknowledge the profound contribution that people have been to me and hope that they get to experience and know themselves for the impact and the legacy that they're creating inside of who they've been for me.
My next question is about death.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you some context to this.
Sure.
When I lost my father, I was too young to understand, but I have memories.
Mm-hmm.
But I also grew to understand that as much as we love and enjoy life, it's quite finite. And I let the people around me know that regularly, but I also set up actions. I wear a tie to office every day. I do not know how to tie a tie. So I've been married for 16 years. So even if I fight with the wife, I have to be friendly enough. Otherwise, I go to office without a tie and my whole team gets to know about this.
Yeah.
Those are the systems that I have set in place.
Yeah.
And that's my relationship to say that tomorrow could be my last.
Yeah.
How am I showing up for the people that I care the most about?
Yeah.
What is your relationship with death? Because you just said, I told my mom and dad, if I'm not, I'm like, okay. Because not everyone has a positive relationship with it, but it doesn't have to be negative.
Yeah.
It could be how you show up. What is your relationship like with death?
I mean, I don't want to die. And I don't really know what happens when I die. I hope something fabulous is on the side of death. I don't have much wisdom around any of that. I need to explore more and reflect more on that. I just hope there is much more to this finite life that we have. At times where I've had thoughts around looking down the barrel of, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I might die. That is a confronting place for me to spend time thinking. What I think about is, what authentically do I want people to remember me for or say about me at my funeral? And if I can shape that narrative, what would that be? And it's something like that everyone I came across felt loved and like listened to or you know, probably just felt my love, and that people were empowered around me and that I made a difference. I don't care for Danielle had a Ferrari, or Danielle was a CEO at some young age, or Danielle something. That's not what I care about. So if that is the future that I'm living into, which is interesting, like the future of the day that I'm buried, then that's the thing that gives shape and form to my life and who I be.
We've spoken about your journey. We've spoken about death, but there's more to life now. Tell me about, what does the next chapter for you look like?
So the funds that for Raise the Roof are being invested in a farm over there. And I was there this month, and we've had 200 laying stock arrive. So there'll be eggs being produced by that stock. And then there's a whole lot of other different projects that we're implementing at the farm to generate income. So the immediate next part of fulfilling my purpose is around the completion of that project, which should be in the next little while. I thought that might be the end of my time in Botswana, but I also have created some opportunities to do some work with some women in leadership over there. So I'm also volunteering on a project. I suspect as Raise the Roof comes to a close, that I'm doing some work around street children in Uganda. That will probably take off. And I'm just looking to expand the impact that I have through my business. That is about as far as I can go. I've never been a real long-term planner. I just will keep taking actions and do what I'm inspired to do inside of what I'm out to fulfill on in the world and who I want to be.
I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this, and I apologize if I'm probing too much.
I'll go for it.
But why do children in need seem to move you?
I don't know, and I don't fully understand what my connection is to the African continent, but there is some thing about that. I love being over there. I love working. I mean, it's a different way of working there, but I love the women in business I'm dealing with. I love the kids. I think I've always had a strong connection to kids. I just think they're awesome. I mean, kids are just like little beings that are so in life. And even the children over there, I was watching some of the kids and they just play. They are playful and they explore and they're in life, and the younger kids are not probably aware of the complexity of what is actually going on for them, which I think is quite beautiful. And I hope that stays for as long as it can before, these kids need to deal with what they need to deal with. But I don't know the answer to that question. And I wonder if all of us have some thing like that is just the thing that moves us or inspires us or drives us or enlivens us or lights us up, that is the gift or purpose that is here for us all to fulfill on. And mine just, well, I was going to say for now, but has been for quite a long time, is just beautiful children.
If someone wants to connect with you, come to one of your workshops, or just have a conversation, where does somebody find you?
You can jump on my website, which is kayoconsulting.com.au. So KAYO consulting.com.au, and you can access me through my phone number will be there, and you can send me an email. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn and social media under KO Consulting. But I am super open, super approachable, and always out to have really extraordinary conversations. So I invite anyone to just, if you'd like to be in conversation with me, to just reach out.
Thank you for being such a beautiful human being. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for sharing the journey that moved you. And thank you for doing the wonderful work that you're doing with leaders of all walks of life, but you're helping people to be the best they can be. And that's amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for enabling me to show up and be that for you and be that for others.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A huge thank you to the wonderful team at Doma Hotels for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. If you are looking for 5-star accommodation, wonderful event spaces, and carefully curated dining destinations, the Doma Hotels offers all of that for you.